Cool. So yeah, let's jump into this. So today James and I are just kind of like laying some ground expectations. We are both relatively new to Next. At least myself, I've primarily used Gatsby, so that's kind of like my it's been my go-to. But I've always been intrigued by Next and wanted to get better with it and start using it. So I'm also been at Auth0 for 2 months now, so I wanted to try to combine these two new things. So there's some things that James and I need to figure out still and get a little better at with working with Next and Auth0, but we're going to be working through some quick starts and hopefully if anyone has any questions, you can throw it out in the chat and we'll see that and answer it.
Yeah, you mentioned being like relatively new to Next. For me, it's like yesterday was I watched my first tutorial. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
For
like
me, yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like it for the most part, the basics make sense. Like I kind of
Yeah,
had a general understanding of what it did before, and I've done enough React to be pretty comfortable there. But yeah, it's definitely gonna be a learning experience.
yeah. 100% agree. Yeah. Cool. So yeah, and so just starting off here, the code that we've got already running is basically just the like quick start next, like create React next template. So this is what you get when you do that. When you just run the quick start thing, it's basically just this welcome to Next.js and then a file path. Let me remove this API folder, but it's
It's
basically
kind
just
of
this in. Go ahead.
sorry, I was like a funny comment. I was watching one of those like getting started with Next tutorials, and I kept thinking the person was typing npx create React app. And I was
Uh,
like, how the hell are you setting up a Next app when you run create React app? It just gives you like just React, but it was actually create Next app.
yeah,
So it actually does whatever you need specific for Next.
yeah. Cool. So yeah, so we've got this just basic thing. And ultimate goal is to just add a login, logout, and hopefully display some user data onto this page. So what I've got running is just yarn dev is what my terminal shows. Let me zoom in on this. And James and I are using live share on VS Code so that he can follow along and he can make edits and stuff as well. Cool. So the first thing we're gonna do, going back to my code here. So we want to add some login button, right? And what's really cool is Auth0, we have this Next.js Auth0 package that we're going to be working with, and there are some. Hey, Will, thanks for coming. We've got this Next.js package that we're going to be working through today, and this kind of gives us the outline of what we're going to be using, and a lot of the stuff that I'm doing, actually all of it, is basically following along on this package. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add this package into our server. So let me go ahead and stop this. And we're going to add
And
it. So this is
just
just,
for general awareness, that like this package is still in the experimental phase, I think is how it's tagged.
mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I don't think it's really something we're saying to go to production with, but it looks pretty good from what we've seen so far, and have at least seen a few different demos that use it. So at least for us to get an intro to Next and then kind of apply some of the Auth0 concepts, I think would be fun.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, so once I added, I started yarn dev again to run our server now that we have that package in there. Did that mess with your view of the
Oh, let me check. So
server?
we're,
Try
like
to
you
do a
said, we're
refresh on that.
using live server, and he's sharing his actual like development localhost server. Still works. So yeah, I've
Okay,
got
cool.
localhost 3000 on mine too, so I can see the same thing you can.
Great. All right, so following along, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to basically copy this code that they've already set. This is going to go into like a utils folder, so I'll create that just at the root. So I already have that one. So
And this
and
part
then
is kind of similar to like we have an Auth0 Spa.js package, which you can use with like vanilla React. That seems weird to say, but like without a framework on top of it, just React.
right,
And it's also something we've done with Gatsby as well. So usually there's kind of like some boilerplate code that you end up copying in, and then just kind of leverage that from then on.
yeah, and it seems like kind of a like you're saying like very standard thing across most of the packages we work with is there's some kind of like setup boilerplate stuff like with Gatsby with the quick starts, and then with Next, like we've got to have some type of like instantiating or initializing our Auth0 client so that it works for all the users.
Yep.
So you notice here we're doing this Auth0. We're getting an Auth0 from the package we just installed, and there are some values that we need to add. So we need to add a domain, we need to add a client ID, and then client secret and a cookie secret.
And I think the first two, domain and client ID, these are not necessarily secret. So in theory, we could just hard code those. That'd be totally fine. Like in all of my demos, I have still put them in environment variables, just because like if you've ever been in like at a company where you're actually doing your own deployments and stuff, it really sucks to have to like if you have to recheck in code and then do a build and then deploy is different than just like changing the environment variables and redeploying. So it's still a benefit to put them in environment variables, even though they're not necessarily secret.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, we're gonna attempt this to see if we can get the environment, because we're both still kind of a little curious in how exactly the environment variables work in Next.js. Yep. But in any case, log in Auth0, whatever account that you have, and then you want to create a new application. Right, I've already done that. You can see down here, it's just Next.js-Auth0. So we'll click on that guy. Once you create a new, let me go back. But when you create a new application, just click on the single page web app option, give it a good name, and that'll lead you to this page, and then just click settings. So the values, again, what we're looking for is domain, client ID, client secret, and then we need to add our domain to the allowed callback URL and the allowed log out URL.
And then for people who aren't familiar with what those properties are, the details of how like OAuth and the spec for OAuth and OpenID Connect work are a little bit convoluted, but basically the way this login process works and like delegated access stuff works is you're on your site, and then you basically redirect the user to Auth0, and then on the Auth0 site, it handles the actual negotiation of the login process through the different provider. And then after that process is back, it basically calls back to your application. So you have to specify in Auth0 what domains are going to be able to interact with Auth0, and then which domains are we allowed to send back to when that process is finished. So in this case, just running locally, just putting in localhost 3000 for testing, so that Auth0 knows this is a place that basically we can interact with and then send the user back to.
Yeah. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, thanks for that. So we've got those two guys in there as we need, but what we can do is pull out the domain, and we'll hard code it here just inside of our Auth0 for now. And then we'll figure out the env here. So this is our domain. I'll copy the client ID, and I won't copy the secret just yet. We'll have to figure out the env. So let's do that. What was the article? Yeah, let's try to do that.
Yeah, let me pull open.
I'll follow you.
Did I change that page? Maybe I did change that page. Rats. I think I sent it in yeah, I've got it here in Slack. Let me grab that link. And I'll pull this open here. And then if you want to grab it out of Slack to pull it up, you can too.
Yeah.
I think so. There's a little bit of confusion that we have with environment variables of like a lot of things in Next seem to reference the Next config file. And you can put variables in there that then get injected into your application at process.env. That seems a little weird to me, because environment variables to me are not something that are checked into source code, and they are that way for a specific reason. So I'm not really sure what Next's purpose is with that config thing. But based on this document that Tyler's scrolling through, I think we can just add environment variables to a .env file, and then Next will be able to pull those in anyway. So I don't know. Do you want me to go ahead and do some of the stuff on the source code? So inside of here, we'll do .env, and is that at the root? Yeah. And then we want this to be like the auth0, and this is the application. And actually, I'll make that shorter because these suck to type out. App secret. And then I don't know. I'm assuming you'll just delete this after. So if you want to just paste in that string, that'll probably be fine for now. There we go. All right. So we'll save that. And then again, based on the doc, it looks like things that are coming from .env files, and you can do .env .local, and you can scope them to different environments. We're not going to get like really fancy, just dumping stuff into a .env in general. And I think those will be able to pull those in. So if you want, inside of, where were we? That configuration file. Oh, I haven't. Is it this one up here? Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
Maybe we can try just logging out or getting the secret, and this will be process.env and then we called it auth0 app secret.
Yeah.
And okay, that looks like it at least accepts that. And let's just try to log out what the secret is, if I can type correctly. And I usually do like a bunch of stars for something that I want to catch, just in case it's in a bunch of other stuff in the logs.
Yeah, I like that.
So I don't really know what the best way, like I can't see your terminal. So if you want to try to just run, I guess it will be a just like a next dev. If you want to try to run that and show your output, we'll see if that logs anything out. So at least it said loaded environment from .env. That info line there, that's a good sign.
Does this need to be inside of like the index page, and we can check the console there, or is this?
Oh, is it done running? I'm not sure. So in theory, like this Auth0.js, whenever this thing gets run, which I guess we're not actually calling a init, are we?
We're not actually. Well, we're not actually using it anywhere, right? Like this Auth0.js isn't actually in any of the files. So do we need to bring it into the index?
Yep. So maybe what I'll do, and you can go ahead and kind of set up. Well, I guess maybe we need to go ahead and set up like the login API endpoint. So if you want to do that based on the docs, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and inject that secret inside of the config.
Okay.
And then we'll see if it works in a second. So this is auth0 app ID. And then, yeah, if you want to follow those instructions and create that that API endpoint for login, for example, then we'll just see what we get.
Well, I'll do the. I did this last time with. If you don't do the cookie secret, then it won't work either. So let me add that in here. The way that I saw to do that is just to run OpenSSL instead of your terminal, and it'll randomly generate a value for you.
Yeah, and that's definitely the kind of thing. It gives you a hint because it's called secret. So if this was a production application, that's the kind of thing you would also definitely want in your environment variables.
Yeah. Well,
so we could do that too, but yeah, I think it's just throw it in there for now.
I'll put it in ANV. We'll see if we can get it to work. Secret. All right, so we got that guy in there.
And then I'm thinking a couple lines down, there's the cookie domain. It looks like if we leave that blank, it will restrict it to the domain that we're on, which in this case will be our local host. I think that's probably what we want.
Cool. What were we saying? Sorry.
Oh, the cookie domain is like hard coded to yourdomain.com. I assume if we just leave that empty, if we just get rid of that property, it says it'll default to the domain that we're on, which in this case is localhost.
Oh, okay.
I think that's okay.
Yeah. When I did this before, I didn't mess with that, and it still worked.
Oh, you left it with your domain? Okay.
Yeah. All right, cool. So let's check it out. So everything should be working fine. I'm sorry, Stud to Design. My Streamlabs is telling you not to spam caps, but don't worry. I should update that rule. All right, cool. So we got that in there. Yeah, let's create the login option. So what I did for that was basically just put like a tag here, a login button. it's not gonna be very pretty, but basically just a login. It's complaining about something.
And this is an interesting thing, different than Gatsby, where you have like the client side routing and you're just going between like pages on the front end. Now we actually have a server, and you can think of it as kind of like a Node.js server where we'll have an endpoint, login endpoint, and now you're just sending the user to that login endpoint, which that thing will then call this login from Auth0, go to Auth0, come back, and then redirect the user to probably the home page.
Yeah. So this is again just copying straight from the doc, from the ambient package we're following. Cool. So this is saying this is just a function. It's an async function. When you log in, we get our request and a response here that we can work with. We're going to call handle login from what gets initialized in that Auth0 utils file that we added. We're going to catch any kind of errors or return any kind of error status to our client. So basically, we want to just call this handle login that comes from the SDK, again from the Auth0 file that we just did before. I'm not sure if I need to reload or start this over again, but let's try it.
Not sure either. I know if you change any like environment variables, typically you have to. I don't know if it auto reloads for just adding like an API.
All right, so we try and log in, and I get an internal server error. So let's just try it here, or let's look at the error. Okay, so the client secret must be provided. So it looks like our env did not work.
Okay. One thing, let's see. Oh, actually, well, you could try renaming the variable or the.
Yeah. So actually, it's saying we did the wrong thing. So it's Auth0 app secret. That's what Stead was telling us.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Auth0 app secret, not Auth0 app ID.
Ah, there you go. Yep.
There you go. Thank you for that. Good catch.
And I assume now like the auto reload should take over. So I don't think you'd have to restart, but I don't know for sure.
Thing. All right, let's check our terminal and see what we got here.
Nope. Maybe the same thing.
Didn't work. It says, let me load. I'll come all the way down here. Let me try restarting it. I mean, it would make sense if like with Gatsby, you create a new page, like you have to rebuild it, right? Like it has to create that page.
I don't think so actually. I think if you add a new page, it will pick it up.
Okay.
But I'm not positive.
Okay. We'll click login, and we've got a 4.4. Okay, yeah. So it worked actually. So I got a 4.4, but that's on purpose. So we did need to actually rebuild. So it looks like that env worked.
Sweet.
Just the way it was.
And why do we have the 404? I'm literally asking. I'm not trying to like point the conversation.
The 404 is because if you notice the URL at the top, it says API/callback, and we actually haven't created that page yet.
Yes, you're right. Yeah. So this is part of that workflow where after the login process happens, then Auth0 sends the user back to a specific place, which in this case is /API/callback, but we don't have that route.
Yeah, and if you go back to the auth0.js page, you'll see that the redirect URI is specified when you initialize that auth0. So you can tell where you want it to redirect once it's logged in. So you can see that it took us to callback. The page doesn't exist, so let's go ahead and create that page.
And then I think just for future reference, like once we get into, I don't know if we will today, but if you had this hosted somewhere, obviously it wouldn't be running on localhost. So I think you can just make that a relative URL of just /API/callback. That's what I do with all the Gatsby stuff, at least.
Yeah, and one thing before we talk about the callback page is there's some extra like optional parameters that you can work with. And as you can see here in the docs, that it's as far as like influencing the transaction of logging in, you can like there's auth params that you can pass where you can pass through like the login hint of like the user, like an email can automatically fill in an email if you already have that to kind of help with that UX experience. And there's some stuff that you can work with like scope, permissions that you've configured inside of your Auth0 account that you can do. So there's a lot more in here that you can work with from when you're trying to log in. We just use this one right here.
Okay. Um, I assume so. We define like scope inside of the init Auth0 thing, which those are basically the default scopes, the open ID and the profile.
Right.
And what these are just basically telling the user these are the things that we want to get from you. So in this workflow of OAuth2, we need to make sure that the user knows that they are granting permission to the different scopes that we're asking for. So in this case, we're just asking for like basic profile information. And I assume what you were just looking at is if we wanted to pass some additional scopes, we could do that there.
Yeah. What's interesting though, like you just said this, but I wonder it's because I need to clear my cache and my cookies, but like it automatically signed me in because I've been playing around with
Mm-hmm.
this domain already. So
Yep.
let me actually go back to localhost and see if I can clear everything and show what this would show if you were doing this for the first time.
And it won't. So even if it does like allow you to log in, it probably won't show you the prompt of the fact that it's asking for access to your profile, just because your user has already granted that permission, if that, or
Right.
accepted that scope, if that makes sense. But it probably will take you through the full login process for you to type in your password and email, or email and password.
Hmm. Maybe I'll add the login button once we get to that, and then it'll be a little bit more clear. All right, so callback. Let's add some code for the callback. Um, looking at the docs. What did it say? So we log in. After trend is completed, it's going to redirect you to this callback page. So we need to create. So this is what we're going to paste in this code here. So this is from the doc. So this is the actual callback function. So this is again inside the API folder.
And I think one of the things in here that's interesting is that redirect to, which is like basically when you finish handling the callback, where do you want to send the user to? In this case, it's the root domain.
Right.
But I think like we could use like app state to be able to, like, if someone was on a specific page and then logged in, we could potentially track that and then like redirect them back to that specific page. Or if they were, if we weren't tracking it, then just send it back to the home page.
Gotcha. All right. So yeah, now that this API exists, now if we try this out, let's see, we'll log in. It'll do some redirecting and you notice that nothing actually happens here, but I am actually logged in now. So like I've authenticated, and this is the Next.js. Like this is what I've got here.
Sweet.
So just to recap, we created a login option. So this is where we're going to handle the login. Because of how we've configured our initialize, we're saying we want to redirect to this callback API route here. That looks like this, where we're going to handle the callback, where we're telling it to redirect to the slash. Now, a question I want to play around with later, or maybe James, you know the answer is, why can't we just redirect to, like, what is the handle callback doing for us? You know, like, why can't we just redirect to the home page?
So the handle callback is going to basically strip out all the information that's in the URL that comes back.
Oh, that's
So
right.
in the authentication workflow, you send the user over to Auth0. Auth0 then returns, and there's a couple things that happens in the URL that it returns. There's not an access token, but a authorization code or access code. I forget
Right.
the exact wording, but it's a code that then inside of this handle callback, I'm assuming this will do the like sending that code back to Auth0, which will then return the access token, which then you can use to make API requests and stuff like that. So probably won't get to the access token in this stream.
Yeah.
But the goal of this kind of workflow is two things. One is to let a user log in. So that is like actually specifically OpenID Connect. Then OAuth 2 is specifically granting like delegated permissions by the user. So the handle callback is basically stripping out the information that Auth0 sends back, potentially sending something back to them as this like double verification thing. And then after all of that goes smoothly, and there's obviously some bigger details in there, then we will tell it where to send the user to. In this case, we send them to the homepage. And there's one thing that like I'm not super clear on, but there's a Pixie and This is something that's been added for an extra level of security in this workflow when you have front end applications, which in this case we don't have. We're not in the front end. This authorization or authentication is actually going on in the back end, so we don't have to do that. But in the front end, you have no way of like securing any variable, so you can't pass like an application secret, if that makes sense. So in this case,
Gotcha.
since we're running this on the server, we included that secret. Now we don't need any other validation to say when the authorization code, or yeah, authorization code, when that comes back, and then we send it uh, to switch out for an access token. Auth0 knows that we're already good because we passed that client secret as well.
Right. That's right. Yep. Perfect. Cool. Yeah. So that's super helpful. Now that we've got the login, the callback stuff working in there, that gets rid of that URL state, the extra stuff. Let's talk about logging out. So we've got a logout file here. I'm going to go back to the index page, and we're going to do a logout option. So we got logout.
And we're working on, I don't know when the official release is going to be, but an Express SDK that I've tested out a beta version, and doing like this same login, log out stuff with that SDK in Node is crazy super simple. They actually take care, like the way we're defining these routes and things, those are actually just baked into the package. So you
Oh,
literally just
nice.
include it, and then you've got log in and log out and that kind of stuff already set up. So I don't
Cool.
know
And
if that will have any implications in Next specifically because it's not really running Express, I don't think.
right. Yeah.
If it did, it'd be super cool.
Yeah. Do you have a link to that? The Express?
I don't. It's in a beta, and I don't know
Oh,
how
it's the beta.
well
Okay.
we are pushing it. Let me see. Express Auth0 SDK. Let me see if I can pull it up.
Okay, well, you would do that. So if you everyone noticed, I mentioned so we've got the logout option here, just API logout button. It's a tag here, and then inside the logout page, we've got we're calling just going back to where we initialize our auth0. Inside the try catch, we're going to say handle logout with that auth0. If there's any kind of errors, we're going to catch that as well. So if we go back to our page, let's see what we've got. We do have our login, logout options. So logging out basically does a lot of stuff behind the scenes. It's calling that API logout page, which then just handles the logout. So from a user's perspective, not much happened, right? We saw a little bit of loading, and that was it. But now if we log in, we can see what you didn't see the first time because I already had some session storage already stored and running because I've done this before. But now when I log in, it's going to actually like redirect me to my Auth0 tenant, my application that I've set up so far. And you can see that I've configured that you can sign up with Facebook, sign up with GitHub, Google. You can create a new account. So let me create a new account here. So we'll go Tyler1@gmail, or
That's
so that's
actually
somebody.
something I need to do, as I haven't actually configured. I've done it before, but just not specifically in Auth0 of configuring for the social providers. In my demos,
Yeah,
I've just used like the built-in Auth0 DB.
yeah. Yeah, so once you create a new person, actually, when you sign up, let's sign up with this person. Let's see what we got here. Once you sign in, this is where we're asking for the permissions that being used for this app, the things that you agree to, the app being able to see, like your email, any other permissions that it gets if you use some type of like a social provider like Google or Facebook. And now it'll redirect us back to the index page, and now we've successfully logged in. So we can try working with the user, which is going to be the next thing we want to work with and see if we can get working, is actually displaying the user information that's now authenticated with Auth0.
Sweet. And I was looking for that URL for the Express SDK. I couldn't actually find exactly what I was looking for because the quick start docs still use passport integration. So
Mm,
that's how we do it up until when this new thing gets released and we really promote it.
gotcha.
But when that thing comes out, it's just crazy simple in Express to set up authentication. I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, cool. So yeah, we've got the logout option here, and so now we're going to attempt to see if we can display some user information. And the package does talk about that, like getting this user profile. So let's see if we can walk through that. The first thing says, or James, do you want to do that? Starting at the user profile, and
We'll
I'll
give it a
follow you
shot. I
along.
think we're both both in the learning phase on this. But
Let's
this
see if I can
is
follow you.
basically creating an endpoint called a me endpoint, and this is kind of a reflection thing where from the front end you could call the back end to figure out who the user is, I guess. So I think what we do in here is inside of our API folder, create a new one for is this just me JS? Oops,
Yeah.
typed in the wrong space. Me JS. There's a little bit of a delay in like seeing just working in inside of live share. So it takes like a split second for it to come back for me to see. And then I'm just going to copy like we've been doing the stuff out of the docs. And so this is just defining a function. And then all we do really is just call auth0.handle profile. And the thing I'm not totally sure on this, maybe a next thing, or it may be just this library specifically, is I'm kind of used to endpoints like returning something.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if like the handle profile itself, if by calling that like it takes care of the return. I'm assuming it has to at some point.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, nothing specifically is returned. So just having like a lack of experience in Next, I'm a little confused about how that works. But
Same.
yeah, but seems to work at least in the demos that we've seen. So
Yeah.
so we've got that copied in there. We'll save that file, and I'm going to scroll down in the docs, and it looks like you can in the docs it's showing how you can like just basically make a fetch request to that, and it's using component did mount, but I think we're probably not using class components, we're using functional components.
Right.
So inside of our index page at the top of this is where we go ahead and just make a fetch request. And actually, sorry, there's one next specific thing that we can do if you're not using um, if you're not using class components and you're using functional components, then you can basically instead of using component dim mount, you can attach on uh, a static function to your object in this case, or your component, which is home. So at the bottom here, scrolling all the way down, they've got a lot of boilerplate CSS in here that we don't really need. But I'm pasting in kind of the next part of the documentation, and it's adding on. This should actually be home.
Right.
It's adding on a function called get initial props, and I'm going to scroll back up. Although people aren't watching my page, I'm going to scroll back up here, and then instead of exporting directly the home function, I'm just going to define the home function at the top, and then scroll all the way back down. I apologize for all this CSS, which we could get rid of if we wanted to. And then we attach the static property to home, and then we go ahead and export default
Mm.
home. And my understanding in Next is get initial props is basically if you have something, some information that you need before you render a page, you call, you attach on the static function, get initial props, and then you return the information that can then be parsed in the function itself. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So instead of get initial props, there's also like get server props. Let
Yeah.
me figure out exactly. Is that the specific name of it?
It's either server, yeah, get server side or it's just server props.
Server side props, I think. Yeah. And this actually works slightly differently where um, we can inside of here just export async function and then name this get server side props. Is that right? And then this will take a context, and that should be async. And I'm kind of actually being a little brave and going away from the tutorial. So maybe we should have stayed with the get initial props, but I'll test this out and I'll see.
Yeah, let's try it.
So what this will do in Next is basically Next is giving you the ability to decide whether or not your pages are statically rendered or server side rendered. So if you export a function that is get server side props, this becomes then a server side render function, and it will make this request or do whatever this thing is. and then pass that stuff into the props inside of our file.
Nice.
So I'm gonna minimize these two CSS things. I don't know if this will impact on your screen
Yeah.
or not, but at least
I'm
for me.
Yeah, it scrolls as you scroll, so we're following you.
Okay. So even the code folding is working too.
Yeah. The code folding looks like not,
Okay. Well,
but
anyway,
I did it on mine though, so we're good.
okay, sweet. So going back up to the top here, now we should get props in here, and I'm not exactly sure how this is going to be attached to a prop. So I say we just log this thing out
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Now, do we need to rebuild on this one, or do you think it'll work?
I don't think so, but
Okay.
I don't know. Like I assume this has got to be the kind of thing that people do all the time. So I would imagine that this will automatically pick that up.
Okay, so we did get an error. It says Auth0 is not defined. Oh, we need to import it on that page.
Oh, at the
At
top.
the top.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
point. So what is it? Just off? Is it a default export?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we'll go back into utils, or where are we?
Yeah.
Index.
Utils. Yeah. I think you're,
Okay,
or
it,
two.
two of them.
No, just
Out.
one. Just one. We're in the index.
And auth. Okay. Oh, the IntelliSense is just delayed on my end because we're in live share. So
Gotcha.
I rely so heavily on IntelliSense that I was like, oh, I must be wrong if it's not showing me what should be there. But anyway.
Okay, we got a new error. Request is not defined on line 216.
Oh, I think we were using originally a different definition of this function, which took in request and response. And in this case, it's trying to pass on the request. I don't know. I think now this becomes context.rec and the res is context.res. I think I'm looking at, I've got the docs open for get server side props now.
Okay.
And you get one parameter, which is context, which then gives you the rec and the res. So if anything, this is just a learning opportunity on how to read docs.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, one more there. Thanks.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually sure. I don't know if you know. I don't know what right head is exactly. I've never used that in Node.
Okay, so when you refresh the page, it looks like it tries to get you to the login. Once it goes through the login process and we get a 400, it's probably part of the line 216, like the get session. Did you try that on your side?
Oh, I haven't even thought about trying that, honestly. I just assumed I needed to wait for you, but I do have this up and running on mine. Let's see.
Yeah, Taylor Johnson says that next 9.3 they recommend using get static props or get server side props. Cool.
And I need to update, or I need to actually create an account. I haven't logged in yet. So I'm logging in on my end. And did that fail?
For me, when I try to hit the index page, it's trying to like log in automatically.
Okay, that's what it's doing for me because I'm logging in and it's sending me back to login.
Does it give you an invalid grant error?
In the network tab?
No, just like if you look at the stream, if you got it open, it's just showing me like a invalid grant authorization code.
I'm not actually seeing that on my end. I'm just getting redirected back to Auth0.
Let me try just rebuilding.
Interesting.
We'll see what we get here. It's like when all else fails, right? Just delete npm.
Turn it off and turn it back on.
Delete your node modules, turn it back, reinstall everything.
And it's even funnier because oftentimes that works.
I know. All right, so I'm trying it again. Localhost 3000. No, same thing. Like it's trying to like log me in because looks like it goes through like the login process and then it sends me back over to the API callback page. And then I get.
And maybe. Yeah, I'm not really sure. So Hmm. One thing we can try is I can go back and just copy that initial function that we
Oh, I
had
wonder. I
where I
wonder if
tried
that's
to get
something.
fancy.
Yeah, like on line 217. Yeah, maybe go back, but I wonder if we're getting
Oh
into that if
yeah.
check, and then there's a problem because it looks like it's try. Maybe that's it's trying to like.
Yeah. I bet. So here's what we could do. Let's do comment that out, and then let's just pass an empty or just null maybe. Can I not do that inline in an object? Session.user or null? Yeah. And then if you comment that whole if there, because yeah, I think you're right. That's the thing that's then triggering the login because neither one of us were logged in at first. But I don't know why it. I think yeah, there's one more. Yeah, that block needs to be caught. There you go. And then I'm gonna save that. Where is all right? So in here, I'm gonna try to go to localhost also.
Says cannot read proper user of null.
Cannot read
So,
property
so
user.
session is null.
Oh, session is null. Okay, so um, yeah. So is that one of the new features of JavaScript?
Yeah, the optional chaining param. Sometimes I wasn't sure if it's going to work or not instead of next, but it says
Additional keys were returned. Yes, server side props. Oh, so inside. Good thing I like watched the video on this earlier. Inside
yes.
of this specific function, you need to return props specifically. So you have to return an object that has a property of props, and then inside of that, you can put whatever you want, I think.
Okay.
So let's see if that works. Man, we're just like throwing ourselves to the wolves right now.
So I didn't get rid of the error. Oh no, it's a different one. Undefined
Error
coming. So
serializing.
we probably need to go back to what it was. I removed your null, so let me put it back.
Okay.
All right, it loads for me now. So log
Oh,
in.
we actually did something.
So user stays null. I wonder if there's something like we need to like.
I wonder if there's any way. So remember we talked about that cookie domain where you left it as a default?
Yeah.
That's one thing that doesn't feel right. I'm wondering if like it's not saving to the session because we're not on yourdomain.com, if that makes sense.
Oh, I think so.
I maybe.
Yeah. So you're saying that I need to put localhost here for this domain?
I say just get like or comment that out
Just
completely.
okay.
Because I think it says by default it will take well like whatever domain we're running on.
I think my children are streaming Netflix or something right now. My internet's struggling.
Or are they killing you? Nice.
Come on.
There's also I don't think these would be that important, but there's a couple of properties in there as well for store ID token and store access token for whether or not you want to store those things in the session. But I don't think that would cause it to come back as a session null. I think it just won't show the ID token, the access token. So we could play around with that later on if we needed to. But
Okay. Hmm. Well, I
it's
can't get
still
it to
just
load anymore.
okay. I wonder. Let me see if I can refresh and
Look,
try
it
to run on
worked.
mine.
Okay. So it worked. I'm logging in. User, open it. Hey, it worked.
No way.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Wait.
So
So what did we?
that's
What? So what happened? We just needed to get rid of that
yeah. I think what it
cookie
would have
domain.
done. Yeah, so like if it's only respecting cookies from a certain domain and it's not the domain that we're on, then I guess it would have just completely ignored it.
Huh.
Which I'm kind of surprised that it didn't do like a warning message or something in the logs.
Yeah.
But at this point now, like
Well, I noticed. It actually, I can see that you logged in too.
Oh, don't be showing all my information. I think it's
Yeah.
just like my email. None of the information in the ID token is that useful. So here's one of the interesting things we can do at this point. Talking about those store ID token and access token parameters, I'm going to set both of those to true, and then we'll see if we get those things back from the session. And inside of here, let's just pass the session to the page, and that way, in theory, we might be able to see the access token and the ID token.
Okay.
And I kind of jumped around on the code, so hopefully
Yeah, I'm following you.
you and everyone saw that. Cool. Um, so I guess let me refresh in here, and then it gets session. What's in the
Yeah.
session for me? I get a
So
user object.
and then just to create
Um,
it at.
okay, so I don't see the access token. I wonder if
So
it's already
there's
created that session initially, then
to
maybe it
to get
we have
it,
to
you have
log
to
out
do
and log back in.
like the Auth0 token cache. Like there's a method you use to get that access token. There's get access token.
Well, I would, yeah, I know there's that too. I thought with like the session itself, if it's asking us whether or not we want to keep that in the session, or maybe it was keep it in the cookie, I guess.
Oh, actually, on the server, I do see your
Oh no,
ID token
yeah, I have it now. So you
and
need
your access
to,
token.
yeah. So that would be because if you logged in at first, then it keeps the session in um somewhere. In memory, I guess I don't know where it actually keeps the session on the next side. Um so if it created the
Uh,
session originally before that was supposed to be included, then it wouldn't have it. Now that I logged out and logged back in, and I think you have too, now you can see
yeah,
your access token and ID token.
cool. Yeah,
That's pretty sweet. Um, you can see the access token scopes as well. Access token expires at, and I wonder this access token is probably an opaque token. So by default in Auth0, you get an opaque token, which means that it needs to be verified against the Auth0 server every time. You can configure this to get back a JWT if you pass in an audience in the configuration. So if you had like an API, a different API that you wanted to send this token to, you'd register that API with Auth0, grab the URL for that, and then pass that in as the audience in the configuration in Auth0. And then based on that, it will send you back a JWT that the API could then validate itself without having to go back to Auth0.
cool. So yeah, I cleaned up some of our commented out. So all we needed to do was get server side props, context, grab the session out, and then return that here so that our component had access to it.
Cool. And then, like, obviously, from now, like, now that you have access to that sort of stuff, or if you just have access to, like, if we just pass the user object in here, if the user is null, you can show and hide. And actually, we could go ahead and do that. Um, you can show and hide your login and log out button if you wanted to, based on whether or not the
True.
user gets passed in there.
Yeah. So we can say props.user.
I think it'll be props.session.user. So you might have to double check it. So you might have to check like props.session and props.session.user, unless you do that, which I'm not super comfortable with. But as long as that works, that is
Yeah,
sweet.
it does.
Sweet. So using ternary operator there, and just figuring out based on whether or not the user is present in the props, which one of login or log out to show. So now on mine,
I think I have it switched here. Yeah, I have this switched.
yeah, yep.
All right, so yeah,
And
I've got
yeah,
the cool.
mine refreshed on my page and I see log out. And then if I log out and then come back, which I'm assuming you're kind of doing on yours too,
Yeah,
I get back and now it says log in. That's actually really cool.
cool, nice.
I really like the get server side and get static prompts. That's really just simple to use. I mean, this is
For
the
sure.
equivalent of like in a regular Express app, for example, like you're defining your endpoint and to be able to render your HTML, whatever it is, if you're using some sort of templating like a Pug or whatever, I don't even know what they are anymore.
Yeah.
Yes, you need to get data and then pass it to your template. This is basically the same kind of thing, but it's React. So we're
Right.
defining what we need to do on the server before we actually render that component. And the cool thing is, then you're basically guaranteed in your component to already have that information there, so that you don't have to do any. You don't really have to do any checking. Um, if you also then, unless you like pass an error to if something went wrong, then you could do something like that. But you're at least guaranteed that the whatever data you told to go there has made it there by the time this component renders.
Yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, that's. I'll put this code up. I'll put it on the code sandbox. I'll tweet it out if anyone wants to look it over and look and see what we did. But yeah, thanks James for joining me today. I'm glad that we were able to get our feet wet with Next and Auth0 and
Yep.
work through some of this code. I think I'll edit this video to skip all of the headache part and just jump right to
there's
the
probably
solution.
there's probably like 20 minutes of actual useful stuff in here.
Yeah. But cool. Well, thanks everyone for coming in the chat. Just tweet us out if you have any questions or DM us on Twitter if you have any other questions and we'll try our best to answer them.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks for having me, Tyler.
Thanks, Taylor. See ya.